So in my first video here, I laid out the claim that the Imam in the mosque today does not understand anything about Islam. I said he doesn't even know what makes someone a Muslim, and I said he doesn't even know the God that he prays to. I said he's only a follower of Muhammad and not more than that. I said it without disrespect, just being the plain truth. I backed it up with clear proof, and I showed plainly that there is no Islam without jihad. Without jihad, the religion that is being taught today leads to people only being followers of Muhammad and not Muslims. Right? So if you go into a mosque today, you will not find out anything about jihad. You probably never will. Only what someone tries to trick you with when you ask about it. But I explain jihad in such a way where anyone that understands it objectively has to admit it's the most beautiful thing in all of mankind. I say that not as a zealot, and I don't even call myself a Muslim. I just happen to understand Islam perfectly clear. I really like Islam, and I can explain it very easily to anyone that is objective and can listen with common sense. Jihad is the very thing that makes a Muslim objectively better than any of the followers of any of the other religions. That's because he's guided by truth. And again, it's just something I'm going to prove in this video. The truth is, all the other religions, it's basically what someone taught them. They were born or walked into a mosque or a church. They got taught whatever truth they got taught. So they argue with each other who the best prophet is, what book is the best, who prays the best, whose God is the best. And they'll just argue with each other. And no one really offers any clear proof that makes it so their religion is better than the others, right? But a Muslim can defeat anyone in this debate. But in order to have the qualities a Muslim needs, a Muslim has to embrace jihad as part of his religion. And I can plainly state why those qualities make a Muslim better than others. But without jihad, there is no being a Muslim. Perhaps your mom has made you believe Islam doesn't clearly explain what happens if a Muslim is a rock star at the mosque but refuses jihad, right? So he gets there for all his prayers, and he's there for Eid, and he's there for charity. But you might think, well, if he doesn't have time to get to the jihad part, then it should be okay, right? And so that's the general thinking today, that jihad has no more place in Islam. I explained all that in the first video, so I won't go over that. But what I'll say about your Imam is he floods you with hadith, praising the qualities of the 5 pillars and all the rewards you get for it. But he's violating Islam 101, right? Because he's taking the hadith over the Quran. For instance, he's saying that, he's sharing the hadith that prayer is the most beloved thing to Allah, even more so than jihad. But what he's not doing is he's not reconciling that against the requirements of the Quran, right? So without proper context, I mean, it's empty, because it's like, yes, prayer is the most important, you could say, from the hadith, but it's for the people that accept jihad as part of their religion. And if they don't, then their prayer is just like a Christian's prayer at church, And so the Imam is just basically sharing things like a priest would share in his sermons. Right. So getting into the proof, besides the verses in the Quran stating very clearly, hey, fighting is required, is also the ones calling, so the verses calling out to the Muslims that cling to the earth and they, hate what's good for them and these type of things. Besides those verses, there's another prominent story in the Quran about the Battle of Tabuk. I don't speak Arabic, sorry. But it was a major battle in Islam where everyone put forth all they had to support it. Well known to everybody that knows Islam, right? And there were hypocrites that were weak in faith, and they don't want to risk their life in battle, right? So they came to Muhammad and made excuses, whatever they may be. My mom was sick, or this, or they had some fake injury, and so Muhammad had to leave it, for God to judge. He doesn't know. He assumed they're lying, but they're hypocrites, and it is what it is. God would judge them. But a few of the true Muslims came to him, and they were honest about it. And they were good Muslims, just like the people going in the mosque today. They loved Islam. They loved Muhammad, with all their hearts. They made their prayers. They completed their 5 pillars that were due. But they went to Muhammad, and they're honest, and they're like, we love you, we love Allah, we love this thing. But they admitted, life on this earth was going pretty good. You know what I mean? It was just, things were going well in this life, and they really didn't want to risk their life in the battle for the cause. It's not because they wish bad of the Muslims and they wanted them to be victorious, but they just didn't want to risk their own lives for it, And so long story short, these Muslims were nearly excommunicated for this. Eventually they repented, but for a long period of time, which is debated, no one was allowed to speak to him, right? And this is a very prominent story in the Quran, so you can't, it's not some weird hadith, so this is a clearly, a story that happened. So they were very repentant for it. And, they thought, for some time that, they weren't going to be let back in. Allah eventually forgave them, because they repented and they weren't going to repeat it. And so what we can get from that story, that's very clear, and it was very clear to the Muslims back then if they didn't know, and it's the same story that's very clear today, is that bottom line, you would be excommunicated if you decided that you didn't want jihad to be part of your religion, right? So if Muhammad was here tomorrow, you're out. Like, there's no possible other way to explain Islam. Like, it's there, it's in the Quran, it's like indisputable. You know what I mean? There's no other way that you can see Islam. You would be excommunicated, right? And so a Muslim today in the mosque, and he's like, well, if Muhammad were here, it would be different. Two things to that. One, you're probably lying to yourself, right? Being honest. And number two, there's a verse in that about that when, Muhammad almost was killed in the Battle of the Arches. And, there's a verse basically stating, is it Muhammad that you follow or is it Islam? Muhammad's gone, right? And right now the people just decided to follow Muhammad. Listen, I'm not judging. Okay, I love Islam, but I don't believe that to that level either. But I'm just honest with myself. That's what makes me not a Muslim, right? As much as I love what I read in the books and all this kind of stuff, and I believe, but, if I don't go for jihad, I know I can't call myself a Muslim, right? And so there's no doubt about that stance that you are out of Islam without the jihad. So I just really don't understand any other way you can weasel out of it. So, I think your mom doesn't really do you any justice by not sharing that. So all you can do is change your religion, which they did, which I really touched on in the last video. So there's another story in the Quran too, on top of that, and it's a story of Moses' followers, right? So Moses' followers, they love Moses, they follow him in his religion, they do all these things. And in the story, they were called upon to enter a city and take it, and God said he'd help them, right? But they were like, yeah, we don't want to do that. And so if you understand this story and you're objective, this is the exact same religion if you go into a mosque today, right? This is the same thing, right? So if a mom says, oh, I need everybody here for prayer today, they're important, everybody's going to run to the prayer, right? If it's Ramadan, everybody's going to fast for it. They're going to be there for iftar, all a big family in a community, right? If he says they need charity for the people that are close, people will open up the wallets. If he says, oh, I need it for Gaza, they'll open up their wallets for the people far. They love Islam. They love Muhammad. They're there for the festivals, right? But then as soon as the mom says, okay, well, we need to fight for the people that have no protector. What's honestly going to happen, right? Everybody's going to look around the room and be like, well, I can't do that, right? And so clearly the people in the mosque today, they're the same exact thing as you see in the story of Moses in the Quran. I mean, again, I'm not saying this as a zealot or that is zealotry. I mean, but it just is what it is. You can't sip the Kool-Aid, and you have to understand that's what the religion is when you're going into the mosque today, right? And so the religions today, the church, the mosque, they don't have this sincerity like the Islam is supposed to have, and then a Muslim is supposed to have for his religion, right? Because someone in church, oh, I love Jesus so much, and and they believe it in their heart and mind, and they're doing all these things at church, and it's the same with the mosque. Oh, I love Muhammad and Islam so much, and they do good things, and they believe it, but you know what? Islam, the real thing, you're not allowed to just say something with your tongue and have it be true, right? You have to, one, prove it to yourself, and when you're standing in front of God, you got to be able to prove that, hey, this life in this earth isn't more important than the rewards in the next life, and you're ready to risk it all. And so that's a sincerity that only a Muslim can have, because he goes off and he does actually risk his life and his livelihood for that, right? And so you're going to get Karen from the United States, and she's going to mock Islam and say, well, what is this? What sort of God do you have? You can be a good person. You're doing all these beautiful things in the mosque like we're doing in the church, and then your God's still going to kick you out of the religion? Like, what a terrible God this is, right? And that's what anybody's going to say from the U.S. and stuff like that. Right. And so most of the time your mom's just going to collapse to that and just, and he's not going to know what to say. But if you just look around the world and you just take off your blinders for your religion, no matter what it is, and just think about it and just look around the world, it will all make sense to you, right? Because if God were to give his followers the choice to fight, look around the room, they're not going to fight, right? Unless they're a zealot, which I talked about in my last video, that is not something different than Allah's jihad. And they go out and they fight for anger and for revenge and pride in their religion, and they're blinded by anger and hate, right? And so their jihad is something different than what God's jihad is. So they're only a tiny fraction of people, and, they're not going out to fight, but there's no one that's ready to fight out of just pure justice for those that don't have it, that they're going to, be the defenders of the weakest on earth, just to get God's love. It's not about what Muhammad told them. It's not any sort of obligation. It's not where they read in the book. It's to be the best of men on the earth, right? To find the center of humanity, to go be a protector of those people that have no protectors. Places like sub-Saharan Africa, and those people that are suffering just as bad as anything in the Bible. Right? And so if you think of it this way, the way that Islam is now, and basically jihad's gone, right? Except for the weirdos and zealots, right? So there's 2 billion supposed Muslims on earth, but we are going to call them followers of Muhammad, because even if there was 1% of them that were Muslims and they believed in something bigger than themselves, and they were really willing to risk their life for, injustices in the world, which were more important for them to defend those people over, their own well-being. And so there's 20 million if there's 1% that were actually Muslims that were willing to stand up for it, right? And so you have a country like the Palestine kids and the women, innocent women and kids getting slaughtered, right? It's terrible to read. Everybody's reading about it. Their hearts are broken in the mosques all over the world, but the only people, like I said, that are willing to fight over that are fighting out of darkness, right? But there's no one that's like, wait a minute, I can't let you do this, right? And so if even 1% of them got together in a neighboring country, 20 million people, and they would have been armed by some means, right, through all the charity and stuff, they wouldn't even need to fight for the cause, right? Because if there were 20 million people strong and they're not there for zealotry and they're there to make sure that this injustice stops, and they say to the world, they're like, listen, you need to stop doing this. You need to cease from this thing now, killing these innocent women and children, or we're going to go in, right? And if 20 million people are gathered together for that, for justice, for the right way, and not out of zealotry, do you think if these people go into Palestine, do you think the world is going to condone those people being mass bombed, that 1%, the 20 million people? Do you think they're going to let them just be slaughtered? No, they're not. You know what I mean? And so it would just end there. So all the people murdering those kids, whether it be from the U.S. and Israel or whatever, like, they would be forced to stop just based on that. That's only 1% of Muslims, if they were really Muslims. So Muslims can't even gather a tiny fraction of that are willing to basically put their life on the line and put the justice for the weakest on earth ahead of their own life, their family and all this kind of things, right? So Islam is dead from the world. I mean, that's just what it is. So it's beautiful. It's the thing that ties everybody together. It's the only thing in this world that makes someone 12,000 miles away from someone else feel bonded to them, no matter what the color is, no matter what their religion is, no matter what language they speak. It's that bond to be like, hey, that's my person, right? That's like my family. Like, you can't do that to them, right? Islam is the very only thing on this earth. There's literally nothing else. Like I said in the last thing, Islam is it. And so that's not here anymore. That Islam is dead completely. So the religion they teach in the mosque is just basically like Christianity. And so when you accept that, it's hard to get, it's hard to accept that. But if you do, and you look at Islam objectively, when you're in the mosque and today and you're like, where is Allah's help for these people that are being slaughtered? When will his help come? Right. But the blood on their hands is on the Muslims, man. The Muslims abandoned their religion. They abandoned the religion. They became followers of Muhammad. They took the jihad part out of it. And that's what happens. That's when you look around the world, that's because Islam is just, there's no more jihad. It's like all the other religions. And that was really what I liked most about Islam when I read about it, is because I was always a bit of an agnostic. I could always make sense of why bad things could happen to people in like the US or Western civilization, right? Because if God takes away free will for mankind, which can breed evil, like, a kid being assaulted and things like this, life would be a lot less beautiful if we all just had to wear white sheets and shaved heads and march to the same thing. Like, it wouldn't be a great life, right? But I could never understand how God could let those people in sub-Saharan Africa suffer for hundreds of years. A child born today will have no hope, nor will his future grandchildren have any hope, And so I couldn't really grasp that. How can a God allow that, right? And then so I studied Islam, and I found out that God basically assigned that duty, delegated that duty to the Muslims. And he's like, you guys are the protectors of these people. I will help you if you help them, and then so when you read it that way, then you see, okay, well, it's actually not God's fault. It's the Muslims' fault. You know what I mean? So it's sub-Saharan Africa, the Congo and all the terrible countries there, but it's also the Palestine. And then you really see the truth, which is, it's the Muslims' fault. They're the ones. There's nothing to be angry about with the West and US and Israel and all those kind of things. Like, the Muslims drop their religion. That's why the people are suffering. There's no one else. There's 2 billion of them. If they were united by Islam like they're supposed to, it would be a force you couldn't imagine, right? And so they abandon their religion. So all the bad things that happen is a result of that. It's not God's fault. God's not going to come and wipe the Muslims' butt. Basically, everything's there for them to know. The example of Muhammad, his story, it's all just perfectly clear, like what path to take. And, they just have abandoned the religion. So there's another famous story this one is actually in the Hadith. And there's a battle of the archers where there was a slave, and he was not a Muslim. He didn't accept Muhammad as a prophet, but he decided to participate in the battle on the side of the Muslims. He didn't do it chasing the 48 virgins. He did it out of an inclination towards Islam, just standing up to oppression and injustice on the side that was against that, right? He never said a single prayer. He never fasted a single day. No zakat. When he died, Muhammad said that slave was headed to the highest levels of heaven anyway, right? And so take someone in the mosque today. Islam teaches that no matter what you do with your acts of devotion and outward ceremony, you don't know what happens to you in the next life. Especially, you abandon jihad when it's supposed to be part of it. So people praise an imam as a great Muslim, but God knows best what he is, right? The stuff that he abandons and stuff, God's going to be the one that judges him the best. But just say you're in the mosque and you continue for 30 years. Whose deeds are better? Like, you pray and you do all these things for 30 years, but you don't even know what's going to happen to you. But then this slave, he's going to go to the best levels of heaven. It's already guaranteed. So whose deeds are better? The slave's deeds are better, right? Objectively speaking, right? And that's because when he goes to God, he can say for at least one single afternoon on this earth, for a few hours a day, he believed in something bigger than himself, which he was willing to trade all his time on this earth for. And there's actually a hadith that states this clearly, that going off in Allah's name for an afternoon is better than the world and everything in it, something like this. And that example makes you understand it, right? So what makes a Muslim different than anyone else in this world, right, is he understands that he's going to a life of eternity, and his time on this earth could be very short. He could go home and die tomorrow. in a car accident or something like that, and his life's over in a blink of an eye, and he understands his deeds are going to be his place in the next life. That's like a gravity that's so hard to understand for anyone, myself included, right? And so I'm not judging, because it's like that reality is just so huge that, this life could just be over, and eternity and is at stake, and just the gravity of that is just something incredible. So this is Islam, right? And so all the other religions, it's for them. It's you go and you do your prayers, and you do stuff at the mosque and the church. It's all for your own soul. It's like, it's grabbing onto the bottom bar of humanity, where you're just doing enough. You're kind of hedging your bet, so to speak, just in case there's a God, and I'm going to do enough, and I'm going to obey him, and I'm going to get into heaven. And you're grabbing onto the bottom bar of humanity and spirituality, right? And so in Islam, they teach, these people, their deeds aren't going to get lost, and they're going to get into heaven. But a Muslim has to believe in something better than this, right? He can't stop at that bottom bar. He's not allowed to. This is what all the other religions do, right? He has to climb to the top of the ladder, because he needs to believe in something bigger than himself, right? He needs to worry about the welfare of the people. It's not enough to just go through the motions and just make sure he's a good person and gets into heaven. He can't ignore those people in the Palestine and the people in sub-Saharan Africa. He can't just go to the mosque and the church like the others do and go, there's really nothing I can do about that, but I'm going to just do what I can here, right? And a Muslim can't do that. Like, if you do that, then you're just like every other religion. And so that's really the mistake that they make, and they don't understand that, because a Muslim is, if he does what he's supposed to do, and he's a protector of the weak, and he believes in something bigger than himself, and his religion's sincere, like, he's at the top of the spiritual ladder, right? And it's not a religious zealotry thing. It's just basically he is selfless, like he has a higher purpose than anybody else on life in this world. And I talked about that a little bit in my first video. But this is Islam, and this is what a Muslim is supposed to be. So while the followers of the other prophets, and, the ones in the mosque today and the church and the synagogue, they just, if you get them in a room, they just argue with each other about whose prophet's better and whose book's better, whose way of praying. And everybody has a way to attack the other religion, right? And so everybody just sticks to their religion, and what the thing is about a Muslim is, if he is guided by those things that I said, and what I said is true, and he is a protector of the weak, and he believes in something bigger than himself, all these different things, he is better objectively than all the other religions. Do you understand? Because all those things that he is, they are not. He's a protector of the weak. He believes in something bigger than himself. He's sincere. He's more worried about the next life. He's a better person than all the other religions, right? It's not about zealotry and what a mom can teach you. It's just the plain truth. He is better. His heart's better. So he's obviously going to be higher in the eyes of God, because he is just better than the other people. And as I said in the last video that I did, I explained why God was actually better too. I won't get into that. But what I will say is, if a Muslim was to come along from before, from the ancient time of the prophets, and he was to appear on this earth one day, right? Someone for the church would say, oh, please come into our church. Let me teach you about Jesus and the 12 disciples and the gospel. Pray with us, and you will be like family here, and the best of the people in God's eyes. Someone for the mosque will tell him to come come into the mosque. I'll teach about Muhammad and the Quran and the 5 pillars. Pray with us, and you will be family to us, and you're going to be the best in God's eyes, right? And so the other religions, the same thing. They're going to try to bring him to theirs. The Muslim is going to say this to both of them. He's going to say, listen, if I were to come join you, would I become better than 75% of the people of earth just because you say so? right? And that's what the religions are. It's just like a quarter of the people, and God loves that quarter of the people, and he doesn't give a shit about the other 3/4, and so this is the religion what they follow. So he's going to ask that, and he's going to say, should I come join you and your God and turn my back on all the people on earth that are suffering and have no protector? Is that what the best religion does? Right? And then he's going to say, tell me about this God of yours. This is all he asked for me. He just asked that you come here and, whenever you get the chance, and praise him and be a good person. He doesn't demand that you, save the people that are suffering from tyranny and injustice. He doesn't mention them. The most important thing to him is that you come and you pray and not worry about all the people and just say, oh, nothing we can do about that. So the Muslims are just going to throw this garbage religion back to the people at their feet. There's no use to that. No use for that. So, but if this Muslim were to appear in front of Muhammad would tell him that he's there teaching the same thing that this Muslim already knows. But Muhammad would tell him, I'm the last of the prophets, and the prophets like yourself before me were not taught how to pray or praise their God. And so Allah has sent me here to complete the religion with these new obligations and to record it clearly so the people will always know. So the Muslim in this question, he's going to follow Muhammad. And so that's what I said in the first video, understanding what the foundation of Islam is. If you think the foundation is the 5 pillars and all this kind of stuff, you just take the same exact foundation all the other religions take, that their book's the best and all these kind of things that I said. And it's a paper card foundation because there's no truth to it. It's hollow. It's all empty. And so when you reverse it and you see that the obligation is the jihad, and it's not anger, it's not revenge, it's the beautiful part. The other religions that you see today, the mosque and the church, it's only beautiful from the outside, but it's empty inside, and that's an objective way of looking at it, right? I'm not telling you this out as a zealotry or some religious spiritual advisor or reformer. It's just they're empty. A Muslim today in the mosque can look at a church and he can say that about a church. Oh yeah, it's great on the outside, but it's empty. But he's not realizing so is his religion, and so someone can say the same thing about his religion that he's saying about a Christian's. So that it's just important to know. So I told you everything through the eyes of a successful Westerner, non-Muslim. I make $250,000 a year by God's grace, managing small business, medium-sized businesses, and just, I have it really good. And so I'm not crazy. I'm not going out for jihad. I'm not telling anybody to chop anybody's heads off. I'm just telling you what jihad is and, how beautiful Islam is and why it's so crucial to go for it. And if you don't, you just aren't going to ever have the values that a Muslim needs, right? So when you're standing in front of Allah, you're going to be thinking, oh, I did all my prayers and I'm going to have my book in the right hand. And you're going to tell Allah and say, oh, I was a follower of Muhammad and I read the Quran. Open up the VIP section of heaven for me, and so there's that entitlement. And, that's just not Islam.